If you're feeling anxious, depressed, and you're wondering what the hell is going on with our world right now, you are definitely not the only one. And I think the majority of us are definitely feeling the same way. If you're someone who's been following my channel from the very beginning, you probably remember some of my earlier work where I focused on a lot about consciousness, exploring consciousness, and specifically life after death. Now, I've been doing this work, I've been exploring this field for more than 10 years now. And I think at the heart of everything, the biggest reason why everyone is feeling so lost is because over time we've become completely disconnected from our spirits, from our soul, from consciousness in general. We've completely disconnected with that spiritual side of us. Even modern new age spirituality hasn't really helped us much. A lot of new age spirituality talks about manifestation and signs and angel cards and angel numbers. But the reality of this field is that none of these things really help unless you're truly connected on the inside and unless you truly understand what consciousness really is. So in this episode, I'm going to explore 12 reasons why learning about the soul, learning about consciousness, and specifically learning about life after death can help you in your own life to become more connected and to become more connected with your own purpose and your soul. So make sure you stay tuned until the very end. Hi guys, welcome to my channel Bridging the Realm. I'm Slava, and on this channel I explore spiritual growth, consciousness, and the truth of our reality to help us become more aligned beings. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and leave a comment of what you learned from this video. It doesn't take a lot to see that we are definitely going through a mental health crisis, an epidemic of mental health crisis. Depression rates are skyrocketing, and anxiety levels are skyrocketing, especially since 2020, as I'm sure a lot of you have already seen. People's anxiety levels have just gone through the roof. We looked at death straight in the face, like death was staring us straight in the face. We literally had the numbers of people that were dying on national television. And just think for a minute what that does to our brain, just seeing the numbers rise minute by minute. I mean, that completely messes up with your mentality. And not to go into any conspiracy theories or anything, but I definitely feel like there was that was a very calculated thing to do, to kind of, I guess, make us more submissive, make us, agree to whatever it is that we're being told that we have to do. Because death, if you think about it, death is the ultimate way of control. There's nothing more bigger than threatening someone with their life, that they will lose their life, than, death. So this is a huge thing. So that's why I feel like looking at death, looking at life after death, and really consciousness as a general topic, I think looking at those topics is going to help us hugely in terms of dealing with our own meaning and with our own understanding of how life actually functions. And the reason why death seems so scary is because even until now, even until today, we still don't really understand it. We still don't understand what death actually is in terms of what happens during death, during that transition, and then after death. Is there life after death? Does our consciousness exist past the brain, past the death of the body? A lot of people still don't know that. And there's so much evidence that is coming out year by year, scientific evidence and evidence in this field of, say, mediumship and communication with spirits. There's just so much evidence to suggest that there is life after death, that consciousness does survive past the death of the physical body. And yet we still seem to somehow miss that whole point. It's like it's lost in translation, or it's just omitted from our everyday reality. And so, of course, the majority of the people who don't understand anything about this and who have never learned anything about consciousness or explored the topic are the ones that are most likely to be really scared of the idea of death, the idea of being completely annihilated and never existing again. So that materialist view we have to get rid of, because it is the biggest reason, in my opinion, and from my 10 years of exploring this field, it is the biggest reason why people develop mental health issues in the first place. Because there's this constant, in the back of our mind, there's this constant sort of like a threat. And, fear, there's this constant fear that if we do something, or if we go down the wrong direction, or if we do this wrong thing, it might mean death. It might mean the end of us forever. And that thought in itself is, of course, extremely scary. So, while on the physical side, mental health, we have a lot of issues that are happening that are causing mental health. Yes. The stress of everything and everything that we're seeing in the world, our own lives, the stress of our own lives, and trying to keep up with everything and paying the bills and doing this and doing that. I feel like on an underneath layer, under that, in the back of our minds, sort of in the subconscious, we're constantly scared of dying. We're constantly scared that our life is going to end and that we haven't achieved the things that we wanted to achieve, and that we'll find out that our life actually had no purpose whatsoever. So, what do we do then? If we have this fear, this constant fear that is holding us and that is creating all of these issues, all of these things that are in our mind, are stuck in our mind and creating a mental health crisis, then the opposite of that will be to go straight into that fear. It will be to look at consciousness, to explore the soul, to explore life after death, to explore the scientific evidence that there is for life after death, as well as to get to know the world of people who actually deal with this world for their whole lives, who are communicating with the spirits, who are communicating with that world and consciousness, different types of consciousness in general. So that was the first reason. So let's go on to number 2. The second reason as to why it's important to learn about consciousness and life after death is the grief epidemic. Of course, the majority of you will probably have had some sort of a loss in your life, lost a partner, lost a parent, lost a friend. We all lose people throughout our lives. But the reality is that the way in which we deal with it in our modern society, and especially in the West, I think is so traumatic and so detrimental to people who are grieving. And it really doesn't have to be this way. As I mentioned earlier, I've been exploring this field of consciousness and life after death for the last 10 years. And there are many times when I've gone online to look at some of these platforms like Quora and Reddit, and what some of the people there are talking about in terms of grieving for a lost one. And you guys, there are so many people, there's so many people that have never truly been able to recover from the loss of a loved one. They just continue years and years and years with that suffering, with that grief of never knowing whether they'll ever see their loved one again, because they don't know if life after death is real. They don't know if consciousness exists past the brain, because the modern world idea about death is that you die and that's it. There's nothing past this physical reality. That's the accepted idea, theory about life, about death in general. And we're given 2 weeks from work, 2 weeks off for bereavement, and then you're back at work as if nothing happened again. I mean, if you think about that, that's just the most ridiculous idea, the most ridiculous way of dealing with death in general. And as someone who has lost a parent in my life, I can tell you that this idea, this Western idea of how we should deal with death and the 7 stages of grief, this was so traumatic for me. I literally, I could not fathom the idea of how we're just supposed to just get on with our lives and continue to live normally as if, nothing ever happened, or, you remember them on every birthday, or this is just an insane idea. And I'm telling you guys, if you look up some of those comments that people post or in the grief communities, it is heartbreaking. It is absolutely heartbreaking to see how those people 10 years on, 20, 30 years on, they're still suffering so bad, so much. And I'm not saying that if we learn about life after death and what truly happens in life after death, you're not going to suffer or you're not going to grieve. Of course you are, but it kind of when we learn about consciousness and what it truly is, and about what happens in life after death, it kind of takes away the edge. It kind of takes away a part of the pain that is just causing you to suffer needlessly. It's causing you to suffer, in such a way that is just so traumatizing to the person. Some people never truly manage to get back to normal ever, because of course you've lost that person, you're never going to see them in the physical. So it's such a traumatizing way of dealing with death, in terms of the Western idea of dealing with death. And speaking from experience, one of the things that completely changed my perspective and how I dealt with the death of my own parent was to learn about life after death, was to learn that consciousness does survive past the physical brain, that actually consciousness is not in our physical brain at all. It doesn't come, it's not produced by a physical brain. Um, and honestly, exploring that and learning that has just opened me up to so many new ways of thinking about reality, and also dealing with my own grief. I mean, I cannot even tell you um, where I would be if I didn't get involved into this field. And it was thanks to my teachers who first introduced me to this field, who are basically are doing this for most of their lives. Both of them were born with the extrasensory abilities of being able to see spirits, of being able to communicate with the spirits of their deceased loved ones, of just the life after death in general. They were able to really understand how this whole field and this part of reality works. And we've even created a documentary series based on their work. And we have, if you're interested in learning more about it, I have a link in the description below, where we do a free monthly event where people can join us, and together we watch the episodes from those series that we created together. And I mean, I could not recommend learning about this more, guys. If you have lost someone, if you're dealing with grief, please, just please do yourself a favor and start exploring it. And don't I'm not saying this for you to trust me, or for me to change your belief in anything, but just go out on your own and explore this field. There's so much information on this right now, both from science and also from people who have had near-death experiences, or again can see into this reality, into this non-physical reality, and can actually communicate with spirits, and just different types of consciousness of all kind, with animals from the other side, with all kinds of beings from the other side. I mean, it's a whole world out there that we don't even know about. And I think the fact that we still don't acknowledge that, the fact that this is still not common knowledge, to me is crazy, because the amount of evidence that already exists out there, it's undeniable that that we're not just a physical reality, that after we lose someone, their spirit does continue to live. Their spirit continues to exist in some sort of way. It's just in a different dimension. And again, guys, you don't have to believe me. I'm not here to change anyone's beliefs or mind about this kind of stuff, because it's taken me a long time personally to really grasp this concept in general, and really understand how our reality in general works. But I can tell you, exploring consciousness in that way, exploring the soul and life after death, can have such a positive impact on your own life, in terms of how you understand death, and also in terms of how you deal with grief. So I definitely would recommend that you open yourself up to that knowledge. It could really change your life for the better. So now moving into the third reason, which is ancestral healing. So one of the things that I've noticed, again, in exploring this field for a long time, is that exploring consciousness in general, exploring how our ancestors from the other side can still exist, one, and still can affect us, is also pretty game changing. And again, we have the scientific evidence of epigenetics that has now proven that. It has proven that, for example, trauma can exist and can be passed down to generations. And in fact, it is well known within the spiritual field that traumas are passed down for 7 generations on, which is why I guess for the last few years, especially, ancestral healing has been a huge topic and has been very interesting to kind of unravel these stories of, of what your ancestors went through. Because if we understand consciousness and how consciousness can travel from one generation to the other, then we'll understand that, okay, so that means that traumas and also, of course, the talents and the positive things that have happened can also travel and be passed down onto the new generations. And so if you look at your own life, and that has definitely helped me with my own issues and troubles and traumas that I've been dealing with, it really helps to kind of really distance yourself a little bit and say, oh, wait a minute, I seem to be experiencing this a lot in my life. There has to be some sort of a reason. And then when you start looking at your ancestral lives and your ancestors as far back as you can go, then it starts to make a lot more sense, if we view it from that perspective that yes, everything is consciousness. Our ancestors haven't just disappeared into thin air. They still exist on some sort of level, and they can still affect us. In the documentary series that I've worked on, my teachers talk a lot about ancestral healing, and it's really fascinating when you kind of learn about the ways in which ancestors can actually come through and either support us in our physical lives or kind of um, block us from certain things. And there are two, I'm not going to go over all the information, but two of the main ways, or two of the main times when ancestors seem to come through a lot are during death. So during death, it's a very common theme that the ancestors, the ones that have passed on before us, the ancestors kind of gather around the person who's crossing over, and they kind of are there to support them, to guide them, to be there with them. Um, and also the ancestors come through when during childbirth. So if you're a mother, I'm sure maybe you have experienced, maybe you've had dreams of some of your ancestors, some of your great grandmas and great grandpas who maybe have come to visit you during the time when you were pregnant. And these are stories that you can find all across different types of communities, and even people who don't believe in this stuff. There's always at least one story where someone will tell you, "Oh yeah, I dreamt about my grandmother who I knew as a child." And these are stories that you just find so often, and it's just too much for it to be just a coincidence. It's too much for it to be just like a one-off kind of thing. This kind of thing happens a lot, and I think if we embrace it, and again, if we actually allow ourselves to dive deep into this topic of consciousness and learning about life after death, it's kind of like you're opening the gate a little bit to that help to come through even more, because it's a universal law that we all have free will, and they can't really, from what I know, spirits like our guides and stuff like that can't really interfere with our life unless we invite them to. And obviously you don't want to invite everyone because not all ancestors might be so helpful, but obviously you want to invite the ones that are very helpful and that maybe you had a very close connection with. And so that's a very common theme within the ancestral healing field of people kind of reconnecting with their ancestors during very difficult periods, and asking them for help, asking them for protection, asking them for guidance. And I think that's such a beautiful way to kind of reconnect with our part of ourselves, which comes um, from the ancient lineages that maybe we haven't had a chance to meet in physical reality, but we still have some sort of a energetic protection by them. And I think that's such a beautiful way to think about it. And again, we wouldn't we wouldn't be able to reach that point until we really opened ourselves up to this idea that we have consciousness, that the spirit does continue to live on after the death, after the physical death. So yeah, that's the third reason. Okay, so we're down to the fourth reason, and the fourth reason is the meaning crisis. I'm sure you guys will be very familiar with the meaning crisis. And I think everyone who is in the spiritual field or who has dipped their toe into the spiritual field will have had at least one meaning crisis of really asking themselves, why am I here? Why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? Why is nothing going right in my life? Every person who goes through the dark night of the soul has a meaning crisis. And again, the meaning crisis, I think, is largely due to the fact that we have disconnected ourselves from this spiritual layer of ourselves. We've kind of just distanced ourselves from everything that is to do with why we're actually here, with the soul level as to why we're actually here. So if we were just to look at it from the physical point of view, from the Newtonian point of view, where we're just a biological accident, the Big Bang happened and then we kind of just appeared over the evolution of how many years, whether you believe that or not. Either way, this is not the most helpful way to look at reality, especially if you want to have a more meaningful life. I feel that if we don't have a deeper meaning as to why we're here, like a spiritual meaning, then it's very easy for people to, one, disconnect with themselves, two, disconnect from other people, three, be able to cause harm to other people. And because we think, okay, well, if I'm just here, if I'm just here by accident, I'm just gonna die and nothing else gonna happen after that, then I can do whatever the hell I want. So I can just go and kill people or go and steal stuff and nothing's gonna happen to me because I'll just die and that's it. There's no repercussion. There's nothing that's going to make me feel bad about this because I know that after I die, that's it. So do you guys see, and if we look at where we're at right now with all the wars and just everything that's so freaking crazy that's happening in our world, this is the meaning crisis. It's because of the meaning crisis. It's because we've completely disconnected ourselves from that soul spiritual level as to why we're actually here. And if we go to the spiritual level, if we look at the spiritual perspective and that soul level consciousness, is very well known in this, again, in the spiritual community, that we chose to be here as souls, as beings, as spiritual beings. We chose to be here in this life because we knew that this life is going to expand something in our own soul, in our own consciousness, in our own understanding of what this reality really is. And whether you find yourself on the extreme spectrum of maybe opting to be into like a very negative experience maybe since you were a child, or whether you were opted to be in a very positive experience since you were a child, and everything in between, is just an experience. And from what I understand from the soul level, we choose these very experiences. We choose everything down to the parents that we have, down to the country that we're born in, down to the date that we're born on. We choose as souls these specific things to come into this reality because we know that out of that specific area of life, that specific family, we're going to get something that expands our soul even more. We're going to understand something, a different perspective of life that we haven't maybe in previous lives, if you believe in previous lifetimes. And again, I feel that if we reconnect it that way, it makes a lot more sense as to why we're here, as to why I chose this family, why I chose this reality, why I chose this experience. And again, I know it's like a tough pill to swallow, especially for people who maybe opted into a lot more of a negative experience. But again, if we look at it just from the physical level, it doesn't make sense. But if we look at it from the soul level, from the consciousness level, from the life after death level, then it makes a lot more sense. So again, that's another reason why I feel that it will really do us good if we reconnect with that information in terms of consciousness and the soul. So reason number 5 is that science is finally beginning to open up. In the 20th century, the idea that consciousness exists past the brain, that there is life after death, any scientist who pursued this topic, this idea, would have most likely been discredited. we were still very much in the 20th century dominated by the very materialist, very Newtonian belief that there is nothing outside of the brain, that consciousness is produced by different neurons firing inside of the brain, and that when you die, that's it. You are gone forever and you're never coming back. You never exist again. That was the main idea that was accepted. And to be honest, it's still, to a large extent, is still accepted today. However, in the last sort of 10 years or so, even 15 years, quite a lot of scientists have been doing research into near-death experiences. And there are some amazing documentaries which I would definitely suggest for you guys to go and watch and explore. There's some amazing evidence out there that is suggesting more and more that consciousness survives the brain. Consciousness survives the physical body. And this all comes from near-death experiences of people basically having died and then come back, having died, gone into a place that they can only describe as, heaven, or a place that is somewhere where they have actually been able to see their loved ones on the other side who have passed over before them. And then they've been able to come back and explain all of this information. And I think, again, this is it's quite well known now, or some of these really famous stories that crop up on YouTube and social media. But again, science is finally opening up, and that's incredible. That's such an amazing news, because a lot of us, especially in the West, do rely heavily on science. Science has become kind of a religion in a way. It's kind of like, if you are not scientific, then, you're crazy, or, you're not logical, you are woohoo spiritual person. But yeah, that was pretty much the way it used to be dealt with. But now so much of science is kind of becoming more flexible. There are a lot more scientists that are now kind of branching out into these different topics in different fields and are exploring what happens in consciousness outside of the physical body, what happens to our consciousness in different settings. And these, again, have been tested. They're scientifically proven, and so much of this evidence strongly shows that consciousness does exist outside of the brain. I think this is a huge plus for humanity in general, and mostly for the Western world, because I think it's the Western world that has really become very entrenched into this idea, the scientific idea, and we've really kind of just disregarded anything that is not scientific, anything that comes from just word of mouth or just someone's actual personal experience. But like, oh no, you're making it up, which, again, I think it's just so ridiculous that we are willing to disregard someone's personal experience of what they have seen and what they have felt over what a scientific person in a white lab coat says, whether this is true or not. And again, I think if you start to explore this field, and if you just literally go on YouTube and look up near-death experiences, there are hundreds and hundreds of videos and testimonies of people who have died, come back, and can now tell you what they experienced. And the thing is, it's not just one experience, it's all of these experiences that seem to have so many correlations between them. Like, so many people, for example, say that they've met a loved one from the other side who had passed away 10 years ago, or they see, again, the white light is a really common one, or that they just hear this voice, this all-knowing kind of voice, or they have this feeling of just complete love and being completely surrounded by this complete just love and trust. And it's really amazing to listen to them. But again, this is, I think, the fact that science is opening up is a huge plus. And I think it's again, it's another reason why we should go even further, and we should explore these topics even more now more than ever. I will leave you with this final reason. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know which one of these, if any, resonated with you. Let me know which one you think or you find the most important, or if you have experienced any of those reasons, and you can definitely vouch for that. And again, just to remind you, we are doing a free monthly event with my two teachers, the very people who introduced me to this whole field and who have been doing this for more than 3 decades. And it's just truly fascinating to really dip your toe into that world. So if you haven't, I strongly encourage you guys to come. It's completely free. Just follow the link below and subscribe. And then our next event is literally happening next week on the 17th of June. So I really hope to see you there. And if not, I'll see you on the next video. So take care. Bye.